Hello and welcome back to Archive Memories, episode 5. Right? This is episode 5, right?
Don't ask me, I can't count that high.
That's true. And evident in the games of Netrunner that we've played.
True.
But we're back here to go over more cards. Hopefully not going to spend 45 minutes on any of them, but, we'll see.
That's just the gamble that we take every week.
And it's not a sure gamble, I'll tell you that one. I've been a little hype on Netrunner recently. I don't know if I'm actually going to end up getting to play it, but I did put together some decks for the multiplayer NAPD format over the weekend.
Oh yeah? What'd you make?
Well, obviously with the NAPD ID, I just, threw every good corp card, or at least every funny corp card I could into that one.
Sure.
And then no economy cards, because there's basically no cards better than just clicking for 3 credits. And then for the runners, I just put together a stealth smoke deck, a Geist deck, and then a Sunny deck.
Sounds fun.
Yeah, so I don't know if I'll end up getting to play it, but we will see.
Well, if you do, you'll have to give us an after-action report on it.
For sure. But until then, we'll talk about cards and our feelings on them.
All I have is feelings.
Luckily, we are moving from a very heavy hitter to a very light toucher of a card.
You can tell he's a light toucher from those skinny arms.
It's true. And the glasses and the brown hair, and really just looks like a nerd.
Yeah, that comb over that he's probably had since 2nd grade.
Oh, yeah. But, I don't know, do you want to start us off here, Isaac?
Yeah, sure thing. Okay, so first up this week, we have Easy Mark. It is a criminal event with the subtype Job. Costs 0 credits to play. It reads, gain 3 credits. That's it. And it's 1 influence. So, all right, Aaron, why was this card not as good as Beanstalk Royalties?
Well, it lacks the transaction subtype, and is not a corp card, so, those two things will kind of knock it down a peg.
Yeah, for sure.
But this card is always kind of a strange one, right? This card is, I feel, very divisive in how I feel like a lot of people try to put it on one end of the spectrum, and because of where people kind of fall on it, it just kind of ends up in this gray zone where people don't really tend to pay it too much mind, because some people think it's terrible and that there's really no point in ever running this card because of, click economy this and, click compression that. And then some people, can swear by it as far as something to kind of lube your deck up, so to speak, as far as, floating it in between those spaces where maybe you're a little far off from the Sure Gamble or Lucky Find or what have you.
Right. The majority of the kind of what you're touching on there is the majority of the benefit you get here is the 0 cost to play. Sometimes, yes, you're just really strapped for cash, and it takes 2 turns for you to just click your way up to the point where you can play that Sure Gamble that's been weighing you down. This at least gets you off of 0 and to the point where you can maybe do something or start playing some cards right away.
Yeah, this is a good recovery card. This is a card that you're happy to have if you, just got, closed accounts or something, as kind of fringe of a card as that may be. Or, you just went all in to go check a 4-deep remote to find an Adonis at the end.
Yeah, okay, so let me throw a theory at you as to why this card didn't see very much play then. This is a criminal card, right?
Sure is.
How often are criminals broke?
Not very often, especially after, a certain card that we just discussed.
Yeah, so the benefit here is that you're getting off of 0 quickly. Criminals don't spend much time on 0. They're efficient. They've got their stupid desperados, so their runs are making the money back. They're siphoning you for all of your credits. It just doesn't really happen. So the problem is kind of what's the point?
Yeah, and then you're going to be hard pressed to find a deck that has both the slots and the spare influence, even at one, to splash this elsewhere. It almost feels like this card's in the wrong faction.
Kinda, yeah.
Because if it was, if this was a green or orange card, maybe not a whole bunch more, but seems like it's at least marginally more attractive.
Mm-hmm.
I probably don't hate throwing this into an Anarch deck. With Shapers, though, of course, you've got Magnum Opus, so, really what much more do you need than that?
It's a good point, yeah.
But, I don't know. I mean, we've kind of already touched on how you play it, right? Basically use it to get yourself from nothing to something.
Yeah.
But is there a particular way you play against this card? Do you even care about this card as a corp?
No, not really. It's just a thing that happens.
This is another classic example of just try to keep in mind that it exists sort of things. Like maybe you're feeling you don't want to be feeling too cocky after maybe you knocked somebody down to 0 or they, again got to your, Adonis nestled in a 4 deep server, right? You don't want to be too cocky maybe with some of those scoring windows.
Right.
But ultimately, you're not really too concerned about easy mark.
Yeah. Yeah.
This card did not affect the meta, I don't think, ever. I don't think any high-level decks played this card.
No, like not after the first few packs, really. It's just it did a thing that nobody needed.
Yeah, it's fine, I guess, in the context of the core set.
Right, like as soon as you start accounting for Katie Jones, basically, who came out in the first cycle, you're looking at something that's not quite 3 clicks or 3 credits per click, but it's close and is a long-term solution where you've got the one card which is giving you economy versus this, you play it once. This isn't an expensive card in terms of its use. It's an expensive card in terms of deck slots for the benefit that you get from it.
Yeah, there's a myriad of cards that you're going to be better off putting in your deck than Easy Mark. Really, at just about any kind of point in the game's life cycle.
Yeah.
All right, well, we're going to go anti-account siphon on this one. How do we feel about the flavor here?
I don't really like looking at this nerd much.
I mean, he is drawn well.
Yeah, but he's a dweeb.
He is a dumb dweeb.
He looks like someone I would be picked on in high school.
Yeah. Additionally, one thing that's always bugged me is how he's just barely holding on to the corner of his pad, like just with like his thumb and index finger.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're gonna fucking drop that shit, dude. Like
maybe if the screen was cracked.
Yeah. But like if nobody's gonna be holding their fucking iPad like that. Like, dude, like you gotta have at least a couple fingers on that thing, like put it in your palm, like
that's what really lets us know that he's a sucker, is that he's holding his pad that way.
Yeah, that is true. I guess what I'm just now noticing, looking at the art, you can like see his index finger through the screen, actually, can't you?
Yeah. Transparent screens, yeah.
Okay, yeah, so I guess really what it is it's just like a hollow rectangle, like a frame, and then it lights up in the middle, I guess.
Yeah, but it clearly has a frame that he could still break or something. It's like...
Yeah. Anyway, so an easy mark, so correct me if I'm wrong, a mark is like a target for like an assassination, right? Or like a hit?
An assassination, or more commonly a con.
Is it? Okay, because I feel like I've only heard it in the context of someone being killed. So I always thought it was weird that this dweeb would be killed.
Basically someone who's easy to con or easy to fool.
Okay. I always thought it'd be weird that they're just gonna kill this dweeb for whatever reason. Flavor text is okay, I guess.
You want to go ahead and read it?
Yeah. Hey kid, you fire that up now? It's bound to be vamped real bad. Some real pathetic individuals around here. But thankfully, I got just the ticket.
Yeah, it's like some kind of vague hustle language. You can just see the guy saying it like chewing on a pen and flipping a nickel to himself.
Yeah. So, I don't know. Decent-ish flavor. Gets the job done. All right. Well, anyway, what do you feel on Easy Mark here?
2 stars.
I am in agreement with the 2.
Like, it's okay-ish sometimes, but mostly it's just meh. It's not exciting, and it doesn't really do a job that you need it to do that much. It's not like it's bad. It's just meh.
Just suffers from there not being enough deck slots.
Yeah.
I guess not even necessarily that. Just from that better cards came out.
Pretty much.
All right. Well, let's move on here. We'll try to make some good time here. All right. I will take the reins on this next one here. So we have Forged Activation Orders up next. It is a 1-cost criminal event. It is a sabotage, and it reads, choose an unresed piece of ice. The corp must either res that ice or trash it. And it is 2 influence out of the aforementioned criminal faction. So, Isaac, why was Forged Activation Orders a fringe card that did still find a home in certain places?
So, Forged Activation Orders does effectively 2 jobs, which is kind of nice. It's a tool that does 2 things. One of those things is it gives you information. And information is important because the corp has all of the information effectively. Anything you want to know is derived from the corp's board state. Where are the agendas hiding? What does the ice look like? Am I going to die if I make this run? These are all questions to which the corp has the answers and the runner does not necessarily.
Right.
Forged Activation Orders gets rid of some of the mystery. You say, that piece of ice right there, is that a fucking Kamainu or is it a Himitsu Bako? These are important things to know.
It is true. Many people say, and of course, I would believe as well, that Netrunner is a game about information, and so gaining more information, for the most part, always has a benefit.
Yes, pretty much. So the other thing that Forged Activation Orders does is economic damage. And we talked a little bit last time about the importance of being able to wage economic warfare on the corporation. If Wayland over there is sitting on enough credits to murder your ass, and you force them to res that Hadrian's Wall, suddenly they might not have enough credits left to get a successful trace off of a sea source.
Right. If they res that Hadrian's Wall, then, their ability to, mid seasons, boom you or what have you, are looking a lot less likely.
Yep.
Which I think is fair. This is a bit more of this is a more subtle form of economic warfare against the corp, right? Because, in the, sort of the best case scenario for the corp, right, is that they get forged activation orders, and you can afford to res the ice, right?
Yeah.
Even in that circumstance, you're not losing anything per se, right? You just are getting put in a position where you're resing something that maybe you didn't account for at the time, or you didn't want to, at this point, or if maybe the runner had made a run on that server that you would have let them buy this turn and rest it next turn.
Yeah.
So it's interesting in that the corp still gets something out of it, right? They still res their ice; it's still on the board. But at that particular moment, is that what they wanted?
Yeah, you're poking a different kind of hole where you're not necessarily saying, okay, I'm just going to invalidate your currency and turn it into twice as much currency for me. You're saying, okay, maybe you have a Hadrian's Wall over R&D now, but I didn't really want into R&D anyway. Let me go snatch that Nisei Mark II out of your remote server now.
Exactly. It lets the runner sort of, siphon, so to speak, those credits and resources to protect a server that will then open up an opportunity to run on another server. Or if the corp can't afford to res the ice, then it gets a piece of ice off the board. Yeah, or maybe if they just don't want to res it for one reason or another. Forge Activation Orders, I think, is a good card because there's almost, right, never a strictly bad outcome of playing this card for the runner, I don't think.
Right.
Because even if they res an ice wall, all right, well, at the end of the day, that's an ice wall, so you're fully, aware and can be prepared to deal with, this little threat that poses to you, right? Just go grab your fractor and you're good to go.
Yep.
How do you play with this card? So I had mentioned that it was kind of fringe, but it did have its places.
Yeah. So basically, you use it to. There's two cases where you use it, and we kind of covered these. One is you just really need to know what a piece of ice is because it might be sufficiently threatening to you, and you need to account for that. Or you force them to spend their resources somewhere else so that you can poke a hole somewhere. And maybe that hole is you get rid of a piece of ice that they can't res, that you don't want to deal with. And maybe it's they res an expensive piece of ice that makes it impossible for them to protect a different server.
Right. This goes in the kind of deck that really wants to kind of make the corp pick their poison, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
That can exert a good amount of pressure, say on both R&D and on HQ. Or exert a lot of pressure on HQ up until they can get R&D really weak and then surprise them with a they splashed a Maker's Eye or what have you.
Right.
And then in the most fringe scenarios, if you're gonna be crazy and try to run like a fucking Blackguard deck or some shit. But I don't know that anybody ever made that work.
Yeah, there were many attempts, we'll say.
And they were valiant attempts. I'm willing to wager. But how do you play against this card as the corp? That's probably a little bit more of an interesting question, right? Is Forged Activation Orders a card that you feel you have to honor super often, or does it just pop up and well, that kind of sucks?
It's a weird thing. Like as the game went on, it became less common. If there was a lot of them circulating around your meta, or if your friend was just a jerk and liked playing it a lot, then you probably want to think about it. But oddly, this is a card that once it's in play, you don't really make any decisions around. It's either you're either resing the ice or trashing it. That's the decision you have to make, and what you have to do is make the right call, and that's entirely dependent on context. Read the board, think about it, don't just res it automatically, and don't just throw it away automatically. That's my advice.
Yeah. I think that's mostly fair. I don't think that necessarily once you've seen the card, though, or there's definitely decisions to be made as far as your ice placement and the ice that you're protecting what server with, and having to keep Forged Activation Orders in mind, because you could play a piece of ice in front of a server, that maybe you're setting up to protect the server with later, but then it gets Forged Activation Orders, and it's like, all right, well, shit, well, I guess that's gone now.
Yeah.
But I think for the most part, you're right that, really think about what the ramifications of resing or trashing that ice are going to be before you pick one or the other, if you're in a situation where you do have the choice.
Yep.
Did this card affect the meta? I don't think it did.
Not really.
Yeah, I think we're in a stretch of criminal cards where the answer to that question is going to be no.
We might have some differences of opinion on that coming up, but we'll see.
I guess it depends on what does come up, but I know that Criminal doesn't have a lot of winners in the core set.
Just maybe the best card that was ever printed.
Yeah, they got that one, and then then not a whole hell of a lot else. Gotta balance it out. All right, what do we feel the flavor on forged activation orders?
Well, the art isn't. I don't think it's particularly well drawn. I think it's one of the worst examples in the core set for just like pure artistic merit. I kind of like what's going on, where you just got some corporate jerk offs that are screaming at each other with alerts going on. Having been in corporate rooms where that was happening, I just feel like I relate to this.
Yeah, I do kind of like just just two schmucks shouting at each other, just like, no, I swear to God, they said to deploy the neural katana.
Yeah, yeah. Everybody panicking. I like that.
Why don't you read the flavor text for us?
All right. As the hysteria in the room climbed higher up in the corporate chain, an uneasy feeling of joblessness began to sink in on the lower rims.
Pretty good, right? Like somebody's gonna lose their job over this.
Yep, it sure isn't the people at the top. That's a guarantee.
All right. But then the question is, is it going to be Mr. Flat Top or Mr. Screamington?
I'm betting Flat Top.
Yeah, I was gonna go with the screaming guy though, because like if he's screaming that much, then he's probably the one that fell for the forged activation orders.
Perhaps.
All right. What are we rating forged activation orders?
I'm gonna give it a 3. I was a little tempted to give it a 4 just because I like this card, but it doesn't deserve a 4.
Yeah. A little bit of a tough one for me. I do think that it is a good designed card, but yeah, I'm gonna go with a 3 too. I was tempted to give it a 2, but that seems a little too harsh.
We both almost went in opposite directions. Interesting.
Yeah, it's a card that never wowed me. Not that I ever built a lot of criminal decks, but it just felt like you really wanted to put this in a certain kind of deck, and that's not really the kind that I tended to play.
Yeah, fair enough.
Alrighty. What's next on the menu?
Okay. Shall I take this one?
I believe it is your turn to do so.
All right. Next up, we have Inside Job. This is a 2-credit criminal event with the subtype of run. 2 credits to play. I said that. It reads, make a run. Bypass the first piece of ice encountered during this run. And it is 3 influence. Okay. Aaron, why was this card cool as shit?
Well, outside of being the first big example of a ruling ending up in a way that a lot of people thought that it didn't or shouldn't have ended up. Because I remember that I played this card differently, and many, many people in the early onset of Netrunner did as well, in regards to how bypassing a piece of ice worked.
Yep. That was quite important, and we'll get to that.
Yep, definitely had very great and powerful implications down the line as far as bypassing ice and what that means. But when that ruling came down, I remember I don't think we actually officially got a ruling on it because I don't know that the core set rulebook really makes it clear how bypassing ice works. I could be misremembering, but I do remember that we did have to get a ruling down from on high on, what does bypassing really mean? What effects do and don't happen when you bypass a piece of ice. Um, and it was kind of a game changer where Inside Job went from being, pretty good to really good, and kind of femme fatale in the
Mhm.
same kind of line of thought. But really, Inside Job is cool as shit, or cool as shit rather, just because it lets you just really pull one over on the court. Like they're probably feeling real happy about that Heimdall 2 that they have protecting R&D or HQ or their remote server. Really, is probably when this is going to be most effective. But then you lay down, you slap down Inside Job, and it's a whole different ball game.
Yeah, pretty much exactly that. Um, so I'm I really loved. I think this card, what it did best was surprise factor, right? Where
Yeah,
suddenly a server that was safe is not safe. It's almost kind of similar to a stim hack in that regard, where suddenly everything, all of the corp, their preparation and their setup and how they arrange their ice doesn't matter anymore. Something about this has fundamentally changed. The paradigm has shifted, right?
yeah, and honestly, I don't think the comparison to StimHack is an unfair one either. Just because, strictly from an economic perspective, I mean, you may end up getting, similar, probably not the same, but a similar advantage to playing this card that you would playing StimHack in a lot of circumstances.
Right. If you just inside jobbed your way past um, like a toll booth that the corp knows you can't afford to get through because you don't have your code gate breaker out and you're going to lose 3 credits as soon as you hit it anyway and they're about to score behind it. Well, guess what, bitch? I am past that toll booth and I didn't have to pay shit. And suddenly I'm in and I've stolen your agenda. And oh, now what?
Yeah, absolutely. This card definitely. This is one of probably the most played around cards that I can think of. Because you just have to honor, especially if it's blue across the table. Now, at 3 influence, you're not going to see this out of other factions. Never say never, but
Mm-hmm.
I certainly didn't see it very much, if at all, in any of the other colors.
I think you should say that because the first the online tournament that you and I played together in,
Yes.
I played a noise deck that ran 3 inside jobs,
Oh.
and it was one of my favorite things to do because nobody expected the inside job splash, and it made it phenomenally more effective. And very frequently, I would use deja vus to recur an inside job and use it again.
That does sound pretty spicy, I will have to say.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, and it worked particularly well with like heavy medium digs. If you got like 4 counters on your medium, and they're just like, "I'm going to slap down some ice." Now I know that he can't get in the same way, and I should be good. He's got like no icebreakers installed, and it's just inside job for 5 accesses.
That is actually a pretty great interaction. The fact that most multi-access right comes as part of a run or out of a run event, which of course you wouldn't be able to combine with an inside job.
Mhm.
But combining this with, like you said, a card like medium, or even say like a nerve agent, um, pretty a pretty spicy little combo there.
Yeah, and also combined with Parasite, it meant that they had less ice protecting their servers overall, and so Inside Job was more effective in that regard as well. I honestly had a ton of fun doing that. Inside Job, and to some extent, Noise lost their effectiveness as the game went on a little bit, so I started doing other things with other dirty criminal events in Anarch, but honestly, that was a lot of fun. I really loved doing it. And I think as a result of my experience there, the inside job splash into other factions is underrated.
And I can definitely see that. I didn't see it a whole lot, but I do think that that this could definitely take some people by surprise at a tournament for sure. Sort of like, running the Scorched package out of an HB deck,
Yeah.
Just like, something that people just don't expect. But yeah, Inside Job is great because you just, playing, especially with blue across the table, you have to honor the inside job. Like if you're gonna try to score, or you're building a scoring server, you have to keep inside job in mind. And I always did when I was playing, my next rush decks. That's half the reason why I was running dinky things like quandaries and vanillas and stuff. Was all right, just throw that so it's 3 deep, and I've got that screening the inside job for my, toll booth or my Fairchild or whatever.
Like that's a good shout for kind of leading into a discussion about how you play around inside job, right? Little fob ice like that is a great way to kind of nullify its effectiveness.
Yeah. Actually, I think a really unpopular card that we'll probably never get to, but I think was extremely underrated that I ran, I think, in just about every iteration of my next design deck since it came out. But Guard.
Oh yeah.
I ran Guard in my next deck in every iteration since it came out. And I loved Guard because it stopped an inside job in its tracks outside of just being a cheap, outer res. But then also just a great cheap gear check sentry that ended the run, which was really not common at all.
Interesting.
But, yeah, put that stopped inside job in its tracks, and then outside of that though, just throw your dinky ice before you get too arrogant about your toll booth at the end there.
Sense. Yeah.
And just to kind of circle back to playing with it, this is just one where you just look for your opportunities, right? You don't even necessarily need to know or even think that you're going to hit a juicy piece of ice with inside job. You're just going to play it knowing that it's going to take that outer piece of ice for the most part out of the equation.
Yeah, yeah.
To kind of talk about what I talked about, or what I had mentioned rather, in passing before we started discussing the card. The bypass effect that they clarified with Inside Job later, and the ruling came down from on high, was that in the early stages of Netrunner, bypassing a piece of ice, there wasn't a lot of clarity on what that meant as far as did you just bypass a piece of unresed ice, or after they resed it, did you then bypass it? And so when it came down from on high, that after they resed the ice, then that was when the window to bypass it opened. Because I think in the core rulebook, it does not clarify very well, if at all, that if you bypass on approach or on encounter, or whether encountering a piece of ice is before or after it's resed. I think that was the big thing that wasn't very clear in the early portion of the game. But the reason why that's important is because even after they res it, you get to pass it.
Yep.
And any on-encounter effects, so things like the toll booth where you have to pay the 3 credits, and Data Raven specifically. This was awesome to get against Data Raven, because fuck you, I'm not taking that tag.
Yeah, fuck that tag.
So this, you just hop past the whole kit and caboodle. So
honestly, as more on-encounter ice started becoming more popular later on in the game's life cycle, I'm a little bit surprised that we didn't see more inside jobs kind of surface to counteract some of that.
Yeah, I guess that is kind of a good point, especially since with Parasite being core set 2.0'd out of the game. Because I think before that, the answer to that was just instant destruction of whatever ice had an on-encounter effect.
Yeah.
But yeah, after Parasite went away, I guess I would like to see what maybe the data was on how many decks started packing Inside Job.
Because criminals usually seemed to run at least 1 or 2, but
yeah. Well, how do we feel about this card's place in the meta? Did it affect the meta?
Definitely. I mean, kind of in the ways we described, right? How encounter ice kind of developed, and and the interactions there, the idea of like building kind of flak screens for your ice. I wouldn't say it was a super dramatic impact on the meta, but I would say that it was there.
Yeah, I don't think it necessarily steered the meta in one direction or another, but its place in the meta was that you always had to consider it, and it definitely made some of the Rush and Glacier archetypes have something to worry about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But how do we feel about the flavor on this one?
I love it. Love it. One of my favorites out of the core set. For starters, I love this art. Like, this dude is in it. He's like using both hands, and he's jacked into the net, and I really like the kind of spiderweb implant effect of his head jack going on there, and he's got like the cool anarchy tattoos and everything going on, even though this is a criminal card. And so very intense, like runner sort of thing. And on top of all that, this man is on the shitter while he's doing it. He is inside jobbing. He is hacking the corporation from their goddamn bathroom, and I love it.
Yeah, I am less in love with this one's flavors, particularly from an art perspective. Not that I think that the art isn't well done or anything like that. I do love the flavor text, and I mean, it's just funny. I do appreciate some good humor, and this is one where you kind of look at the art and you're like, is this dude on the toilet? And then you read the flavor text and you're like, oh, damn, that's funny. Which the flavor text does read. Hey, listen, I'm not asking you to do anything dangerous. Let me into the building and tell me which room has the weakest security. And please don't say the bathroom again. Funny stuff.
I just love the idea of bringing down a mega corporation from their horrible hell bathrooms.
Yeah. So back to the art, though. The one thing I hate is I fucking hate this dude's face, man. Like the little goblin, like, ugh, just don't like the face he's making.
I give him a break, dude. He's jacked into the net.
He's wearing whatever that fucking like. There was a piece of hardware that literally came out for what he's wearing later in the game. That added some kind of another layer of flavor onto this, because what he's wearing basically diverts neural damage to children wearing this somewhere else in the world. Which, even better, I say.
Sometimes the hackers are the bad guys too.
Well, we'll call it a gray area.
Like gray matter area.
All right, what rating are we slapping on Inside Job here?
You're about to give it to me 5 stars. I love this card.
You know what? I'm not going to give it to you. I was kind of expecting that.
I love the art of this card. I love the flavor of this card. I love the marriage of interactions where it's like you're already hacking from inside, so you're getting past the outermost piece of ice, whatever their outer layer of protection is. It's just invalidated. I love the paradigm shift that this card brought to just changing up what was going on the table and out of left field. I love that shit. 5 stars. Love it.
Yeah, I don't share, as much of your excitement. I do think that I do love the kind of flavor to function of it. I do think that it's a great and fun effect. I do think that it's a powerful effect, and I do think that it's just a fun card to play. But not feeling a 5. I'm gonna give it a 4, just because. Yeah, I think it's just outside of the 5 range for me.
Fair enough. I don't expect everyone to share my personal love for things, but yeah.
But I can't understand it. I can see why you would give it a 5. All right, we are moving right along this time. All right, I think I'm taking this one, right?
It's all you.
All right, so now we have a special order. This is a 1 credit to play event, and it reads: search your stack for an icebreaker. Reveal it and add it to your grip. shuffle your stack. And it is 2 influence out of the criminal faction. Still on criminal cards. So, Isaac. Why was Special Order not a flashy card, but for a long time, just a necessity out of criminal?
Because they really lacked other tutors. So it's important to be able to go and get the icebreakers that you need in order to run and get in and steal agendas and account siphon bitches and get rich and so on and so forth. You got to get in. Criminals, generally speaking, are getting in via icebreakers. That's the majority of what they're doing. Like they have inside job, we kind of just talked about that. But and they've got sneak door beta as well as kind of like another way in sometimes under some circumstances. But they don't have the anarch propensity for just blowing everything up. So they got to get in the conventional way most of the time. And that means they need their icebreakers. And that means you got to find the icebreaker that you need. If both of your corroders are at the bottom of your deck and you're playing against Wayland and there's ice walls everywhere, then you're just fucked if you can't, find what you need. So Special Order, it's 1 cost to play, it's cheap, it's easy. You find an icebreaker, you put it in your hand. Like it's solid. It's really solid.
Yeah, it's just a good effect. And honestly, I think the biggest effect, this is a card that has an effect that's kind of greater than what its text really says, what this card really means for criminal decks is that it saves you deck slots and influence because you probably don't have to run that extra copy of, Corroder or your other icebreaker. Because this is a pseudo or proxy icebreaker. Because, when you draw this card, that means, for all intents and purposes, of course, minus the extra click to go grab it and credit, of course. But for all intents and purposes, when you draw Special Order, you drew X icebreaker.
Yeah, pretty much.
So this is a card that lets you get away with, and of course, this may be dangerous, but this is a card that let you get away with maybe only running 1 each of your icebreakers.
Yeah, or running 1 each of the ones you're importing, and then maybe a worse icebreaker from in faction alongside them if you really happen to need them, like a peacock or something.
Sure. Because if you look at this from just like, say, a deck slot perspective, right? On average, you're going to probably run 2 each of your icebreakers, correct?
Yeah.
So if you are running 2 each of your icebreakers, that's 6 deck slots. And then, if you're running 2 each, you may or may not decide to run Special Order on top of that. But if you, say, just run 1 each of your icebreakers and then 2 Special Orders, that's only taking up 5 of your deck slots. So you have 1 extra slot to put another card that could be a very high impact card. That could be, depending on what deck you're running, that could be a 3rd copy of Account Siphon, but I mean, really, that's probably the first card you're putting in a criminal deck. But that could be a 3rd copy of a very pertinent card. And that's not even discussing, like we had talked about, the influence that it may save you.
Yeah.
So I think that is a little bit of an understated facet of Special Order, in that it gives you flexibility in the deck building stage of the game, to where your hands maybe aren't as tied with dedicating slots to your icebreakers.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right there.
But how do you play with it? I mean, we kind of already talked about it, right? I mean,
you throw 3 in your deck.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know if you throw 3 in your deck. I think Special Order is a comfortable 1 or 2 of.
I would never put 1, really. I might put 2, if I'm trying to save a little bit of space. But
1 is totally fine. I think 1 is completely fine. Because all 1 is it's just, you treat it as another copy of one of your icebreakers.
I would be nervous with one. Maybe that's just me. I would be nervous with one.
I think it's totally fine to run, like you had talked about, one corroder, and then instead of importing the second one, put a special order. And then, two of your other breakers if that's the route you want to go.
I suppose. I don't know. I just like having the peace of mind of knowing I've got several of these so that, what if most of my icebreakers are just buried in my deck? I just want that consistency.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. But yeah, I mean, I think on average 2 is probably the sweet spot there.
2 might be more fair than 3, but
3 to me feels like you're dedicating, too many slots at that point, right? Because then you're almost defeating the purpose of kind of what I just talked about. Now, you're just kind of taking up slots with special orders.
yeah, but it's consistency. I mean, that's one of the things you're doing anytime you run multiple copies of any card is you're trading your deck slots out for more consistency, or you're thinning deck slots for higher risk and getting screwed on your draws.
Yeah, I'd say it's a little different for icebreakers though, where you do only need to get them out in most circumstances. We'll say 80% of the time you only need to get them out the one time.
Yes.
Icebreaker consistency is a little bit different than, say, the consistency in regards to like economy cards or card draw.
But most criminals, until the advent of that fucking turtle, still needed to get one icebreaker of each type out. So that's still 3 icebreakers that you're going to need by mid game most of the time.
It's true. But anyway, and then yeah, honestly, regardless of whether you slotted 1, 2, or 3 of this, when you draw it, what icebreaker do you need? What's the most important one? What ice do you see on the board? Or, if you haven't made any runs yet, what's your fucking killer? Is that the century breaking ones?
Yeah.
What's your killer? Because you probably want to go get that. Probably a similarly boring story with playing against it.
The one thing I like many cards, there's not a lot you do with this. The one thing I would account for playing against it is this is a card that the runner has to reveal to you what the icebreaker is. So what I would say is pay attention to that. And particularly if this is happening like at the end of their turn. If they're digging and it's clear they're trying to find that corroder and they finally draw a special order, and then on their last click they play that special order and they pull a corroder out of their deck and they show it to you. Look at that card. Be like, okay, now they have their corroder. Guess I better account for that.
Yeah. Just pay attention, right? I mean, if they went and got their corroder, then okay, hey, I probably want to play, a code gate or a sentry rather than, a barrier. And also, this is another card where kind of playing around it is not being too cocky, right? Because you don't want to feel safe in the fact, right? Oh yeah, I know that they don't have their decoder right now, so let me just throw this toll booth down. I'm good to go, and I'll double advance this prio rec, and then sure enough, first click, oh special order, oh I'm an idiot.
Yep, we've all done it at some point. So
yeah, so special order is a card you want to keep in mind because if they don't have what they need, there's a chance that they can just go get it. And that kind of effect became even more pertinent later in the game as even more powerful tutors started to bubble up.
Sure. Tutors are basically just something to think about. Think about the idea that based on their faction, what are their available tutors? Can they just go and get what they need in 2 clicks or 1 click or whatever?
Yes, sir. Did this card affect the meta?
Yeah. Basically, in the ways that we described, it mostly based in deck composition, enabling people to run, enabling criminals to run 1 corroder, more or less.
Yeah. Well, and then even later, I mean, I would argue, kind of back to my original point of, saving influence. I don't even think it's outside of the realm of possibility that to save yourself influence, when Paperclip, kind of was on the scene and it costed that 1 more influence than Corroder, I could absolutely see the case for running 1 Paperclip and then splashing a special order instead of a second copy to save yourself the 1 influence.
I think that's reasonable.
Especially being that paperclip, once it gets trashed, who cares? Because you can just reinstall it. So, definitely fair. I think that this card's effect on the meta was, of course, that it was the bar, right, for tutors, and then helped free up some flexibility in deck building. How do we feel about Special Order's flavor, though?
This card is white bread. It's in lots of things. Some of those things you even like. But the thing itself is basically just there. And it doesn't do much. I mean, you kind of need it for stuff. If you want a sandwich, you gotta wrap it in some fucking bread of some kind. But this particular bread is not a party.
Yeah, I think it's a little odd that they opted to go just like a boring ass delivery clone instead of something else.
Yeah, and it's like there's a lot of ways you could have like special ordered something. And it's just the UPS guy.
Yeah, right. Like honestly, it's fucking cyberpunk future, dude. Like, why not a fucking the delivery dude in a fucking jetpack, like dropping it on somebody's doorstep or something? Like there's a lot of ways, like you said, that you could be special ordering something in the fucking future.
You could be getting something drone dropped literally on your lap.
Yeah, like there's cooler ways, to show us that, not just yep, thumbprint here, okay.
Yeah.
And the flavor text is kind of whatever too.
You want to go ahead and read it?
Sure. Feverishly tracking its frustratingly slow progress across the Pacific, the package finally shows up, hours later. I mean, I guess we all been there, but...
Yeah, I think the flavor text gives us a bit more insight than the art does. It's a bit better because it's like frustratingly slow progress across the Pacific, and it shows up hours later. It's giving you an idea of what is considered inconvenient in the future is not really the same as it is today.
That's true. Patience is on a different scale in the world of tomorrow. I guess it is worth touching on in the flavor, and this kind of flavor will be brought up with later cards, but that this is a Tenma line clone.
We will see more of them.
Yep. And Tenma was definitely showing up in the flavor, and I think culminated in a pretty interesting way.
Agreed.
But I guess we'll see if we ever get to him. But as is, this is not that Tenma.
Okay, let's get this over with. 3 stars, white bread.
Interesting. I'm actually going to give it a. No, I was going to give it a 2, but that seems too harsh.
It's better than a 2.
It is. It's better than a 2. Pure 3 effect, as well.
On pure effect, I think it's better than a 3 as well, but it's boring.
Yeah, it just is what it is. It's necessary, but it's not exciting.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Okay. Next up, we have Lemuria Code Cracker. This is a criminal hardware card. Costs 1 to install. It has an ability that reads 1 click and 1 credit. Expose 1 card. Use this ability only if you have made a successful run on HQ this turn. And it is 1 influence. So, Aaron, why was this card just so unhelpful?
Well, because this is a card that... So as we discussed earlier, right? Netrunner is a game of information, right? So having information, like I said, in most circumstances is going to be beneficial. And this is a card that gives you information.
Yep.
However, it comes with a lot of caveats.
Yeah.
Because you have to think, right? We'll just kind of run through the list. We'll bullet point it. So first and foremost, it's a hardware. So that means it's a card that you have to spend a click to install and get on the table first before you can use its effect. So that's kind of strike one. And it costs 1 credit to play. So not free. You got to spend a click and a credit in order to have access to use this. Then you have to spend another click and a credit to be able to actually use the ability. So it's not as though you just spend the click and a credit to be able to expose a card. And then finally, you can only use the ability if you've made a successful run on HQ. Which now, criminals are going to try to do a lot, and your aim is going to be probably to be making a lot of runs on HQ. But there's a lot of things that you have to do in order to be able to use this card. And 10 out of 10 times, as history taught us, there's other cards that are going to be more worth your time and effort.
Yep, pretty much.
I don't know that this card ever really saw any sort of legitimate play. Now, I would argue that I guess if you're gonna try to, as we discussed earlier, like do a blackguard deck, that you probably run this card. But then, even then, maybe not, because you probably just run Silhouette and get that ability passively.
Yeah, it's too conditional and expensive and time consuming and blech.
I'm going to be honest with you. This is one card that I always forget is in the core set because it just has that air about it of those like useless Genesis cycle cards where they didn't really know how to make cards that were, balanced. So like basically there was a huge, kind of amount of cards that were either way too fucking good or just useless.
Yeah.
And this card, just for some reason, I always think it's like an early Genesis cycle card because it's just so useless.
Yeah, you're kind of right.
So every time I'm surprised that this is a core set card. Because like I said, it just feels like a Genesis cycle card when they, kind of didn't really know how to design, expansions and, cards for the future and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's like they wanted to add a new effect or a new interesting effect, but it's like, oh well, we don't want it to be too powerful though, so we're gonna overbalance it, and nobody's ever gonna play it.
It's just kind of why are you here?
Yeah. So here's a question though: do you think that if it did not take a click to use, that it would be worth it?
Maybe. There's maybe situations where I would consider running it and then not run it anyway.
Because the only thing that it may open up, right, is say you remove the click cost, right? Then at that point, if you have the the finances to do so, you could theoretically, after running on HQ, expose the whole court board if you were so inclined, and that seems situationally powerful.
Perhaps, like maybe then I would run it in a weird blackguard deck, but not like this.
Not like this. So how do you play with this card if you were to be so inclined to do so?
I don't. I'm sorry. There's no situation in which I run this card. I'm not going to entertain this question.
I mean, like I said, if you're really trying to meme it up with a blackguard deck, I could see this as like a one-off.
Even then, there's so many better exposed cards out there.
Sure, but as we kind of talked about, this one does grant you at least a bit of consistency. Because basically all the other exposed cards in the game are tied to either an ID or an event card that happen, and then it's done so. Except for I think the snitch expose, or do you just look at it?
Snitch exposes, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, so then, yeah, if you have Snitch, then why even bother with this card?
There's just better solutions.
It's true. Yeah, so even out of a meme Blackguard deck, you probably don't run this.
Yeah, it's time consuming, it's expensive, and it's conditional. It's got everything going against it.
Yeah, this is the type of card that you don't even put in a core set only criminal deck.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a 0% chance. Nobody
Like,
runs this.
you're getting better use out of a fucking access to global sec than you are this card.
I'm gonna say it. This is the worst card that we've looked at so far, and it might be the worst card in the core set.
No, Worm is still worse.
Nope. I think this is worse than Worm.
I don't, because there are at least scenarios where. So the scenarios in which Worm is useful are on such a more skewed scale than the scenarios where this is useful. Because here's the thing: is Lemuria Codecracker, its effect and being able to use it is still useful, and it's not so insurmountably difficult as being able to have 17,000 credits to be able to use Worm in any sort of effective way.
But Worm can be used in ice destruction, which is good, and exposing cards mostly isn't.
I'm gonna have to agree to disagree on that. I think Worm still has the throne. This may be like the second in command of shit cards, but I just don't think it topples Worm.
Okay. All right. Well, how do you play against it then?
You laugh. Next question.
You mean you don't slot Zaibatsu loyalty for this shit?
That legitimately actually may be the real worst card in the core set.
It might be. It's possible.
But that we'll get to that bad boy. We're not even going to ask about the meta question because literally nobody ever played this. Flavor though, how do we feel about the flavor? That's the one thing I like about discussing the flavor on cards is because everybody gets to play this game.
Yeah. But even then, it's kind of bland. Like it's not terrible. It's better than Special Order was because you get this funny little code cracker device, and it's there to interpret data, and like the marriage of effect with flavor kind of works. It's like if you got into their HQ already, then you've got access to some of their encoded material, and you use this to decrypt it, so you know what the hell they're doing. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, I do like the art. I think the art's like pops a little bit. And the little device itself, I do think has a little bit too much of a 80s and 90s sci-fi look to it. Like I don't know why this futuristic code cracking device looks like a fucking Nokia cell phone. But yeah, I mean, it is. I do still think it's kind of eye catching.
It's not bad.
Why don't you read the flavor text for us?
A little preparation goes a long way. Gabriel Santiago.
Yeah, you know what, Gabriel? I think that this little bit of preparation did not go any way at all. And if you were carrying this thing around, you're a chump.
I think it is he's giving a nod to the preparation being, don't put this in your deck, guys. That's how you prepare.
Exactly. Prepare to not take this card out of the box. All right. Now is the time for judgment. What say ye, Isaac?
1 star because I like the marriage of flavor and effect. But that's the only reason.
That's fair. I will also give it 1 and not 0, just because I do think the art is neat. All right. Well,
a high note to end on.
Yeah, what a great card to go out on, honestly. But like I said, so far, not a lot of bangers from the criminal faction in the core set.
Well, we've had Inside Job and Account Siphon, and those are both great cards.
It is true. But we're still not even done. We have some heavy hitters coming up here soon enough.
True. But y'all bitches will have to wait for that until next time.
Yep, and that is where I will leave us on this episode. Is that until next time, play Netrunner.
Good plan.
Bye.